everybody. It's Doormat Mom. Welcome back to the Doormat Mom No More podcast, where we tackle all things parent-child estrangement, family estrangement. And today I have a co-host, Andy Lyons. Many of you know him as one of the administrators on our burgeoning group, Facebook group, Doormat Mom No More. Which has been exploding since the Wall Street Journal article came out, featuring me and a number of other parents who are estranged, talking about that angle of the epidemic. And here's the thing. I am amazed at how many estranged parents are out there. Even more than I realized. We're getting people from all over the world. And we're getting a lot of estranged dads, doormat dads, who are joining the group now too. So that's very, very interesting that now they feel like they can come out from underneath the shadows and talk about their experiences there. But the guest that I'm featuring is an author. Her name is Mónica Guzmán. And how I came across her was an incredible book that I stumbled upon. And I'm going to bring it up. I never thought of it that way. If you haven't read the book, go get that book, because I find it so helpful in teaching communication on a level that can bridge, polar opposite perspectives and views. And that could be applied to anything. It could be applied to polar opposite political perspectives. It can be applied to cultural perspectives. It can be applied to, you have it, and you can actually apply it to bridge the communication between estranged parents and their estranged kids. And that's my goal of this episode, is to learn a little bit about her and from her as to why not only did she write the book, but some of the things, the skills and the things she's adopted to be able to speak to her own parents who share very different values in certain ways, different views politically and whatnot. And yet the desire to have a relationship with them and vice versa is extremely strong. So, so there you have it. So I'm going to bring her on. But first, I want to show you a video that struck me, and then also maybe talk a little bit about a story that based on a letter I got, a note through TikTok. But let me show you this video first. And we'll go from there. Let me go and bring this on. Go over here and start it.
If a person really wants to understand you, it doesn't matter how you say it. And if somebody doesn't want to understand you, it doesn't matter how you say it. People get a very distorted idea about whether they make sense or not. They feel like they don't make sense because the emotionally immature person is not invested in trying to understand them. They're invested in getting off the hot seat as quickly as possible.
Which is why they erupt, or they dismiss,
Yes.
or they get defensive, or they put it back on you. And then that trains you to walk on eggshells and use a different tone of voice and worry about whether or not this is the right time, or couch it in a certain way in order to manage somebody's emotional immaturity. And that just leaves you feeling like you're the problem.
Exactly. And you also identify the wrong problem. You think that you need to learn better communication skills. That's not the problem. If someone wants to understand you, they will knock themselves out trying to understand you.
I truly believe that. I truly believe that. And one of the things I love about my upcoming guest is she wanted to understand her parents. She wanted to understand her parents. So she made an effort, and she dedicated a whole book to doing it. So when I was sitting here yesterday, I got a note through TikTok from a young woman who reminded me a lot of Mónica Guzmán. She was a young woman who expressed to me that she loves her parents and she, works hard to have a relationship with them. And in fact, she won't give up her relationship with them. However, she feels like she cannot share with them some of her experiences or her perceptions of experiences that she went through growing up with them. And every time she's tried, they push back. And, they say, they, I guess in a sense, make her feel as if, she can't talk about it to them. And, or they just, that didn't happen or what have you. And maybe it didn't, maybe it didn't. But the reality is she's coming to them because she wants the relationship with them and she wants to share it. And she's feeling dismissed. And so she feels like she can only have a surface level relationship with her parents. And that she's, this is the situation. Although that's still enough to be able to have a relationship overall, she feels unheard. And I explained to her, because she really was, she's a very nice girl. And she was really, coming from a place of, again, wanting to have a relationship. Sometimes parents, it hurts them so much to know that they let their child down, that they were human, that they had human moments that caused the child pain. And look, we're not perfect parents. No one's a perfect parent. And I don't think any estranged parent believes they're perfect parents either. At least most of them don't. But it many times parents they push back on their kids. And in essence, these kids interpret it as being pushed away or not heard because the parent feels so bad that they let their child down, that they're really not pushing back on the adult child. They're pushing back on the notion and the hurt in them that they caused pain for their child. But it comes out interpreted differently by the child. So again, a woman who wants to have a relationship will continue to have a relationship, but this is also a reality. And I know that many estranged parents do try to hear their children and whatnot, but we can't discount the fact that there are a few that don't, and they can't get over that hump. And so because of that, you're seeing a limited relationship or a breakdown of the relationship. And that's why I think this guest is so important, because she's here to help, expand the communication skills we already have. And also, the reality is, there's a tremendous amount of stunted communication among our youth today because they haven't needed the skills, or they're communicating in such a different way that when it comes to one-on-one communication, they don't know how to do it in many cases. So we're looking at all of that today. So I'm going to bring both Andy Lyons on, who is going to co-host today, and then Mónica Guzmán. So here we go. We'll bring both to the stage, and here we go. Hi, guys.
Hey. Hello.
Did I cover it? Did I cover it?
I mean, yeah. I think you covered a lot. The video made a really, really good point about the tragedy of we can't control other people. And it's an inconvenient truth. And the sooner we accept that, the more empowerment we're going to find in the places where it actually exists.
Right.
I saw that video was with Mel Robbins, who wrote the book Let Them. And
right.
There's a reason it's such a popular book right now.
Right. I agree. Yeah, there's definitely. So, Mónica, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us what led you to write the book, in more detail, and how it's been received overall. But let us in on the whole scoop.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I think it's really valuable to break open this conversation about estrangement in the context of everything that's going on and all the ways in which a kind of separation is feeling like the right decision for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. So my story is political and personal. I came to my work because I'm in a politically divided family, as you mentioned. So I'm a Mexican immigrant. My parents are Mexican immigrants. And as soon as we became citizens, my parents went right and I went left. And we have not budged in that whole time. It's been dramatic. There's been some very loud conversations in cars, in restaurants, all kinds of arguments, all kinds of heat. As I like to say, heat in a conversation is good. The heat of a conflict, when different perspectives, kind of get into the friction with each other, the question is, are you cooking something or are you burning something?
That's good.
So in 2016, the presidential campaign starts. And that was a real test for my family. And it was a real test for a lot of families across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a conversation I had during that campaign with a good friend of mine who shares my politics. And what she told me, she was asking questions about my parents' beliefs, and I was giving her honest answers. And she said, Monica, I think you may just need to disown them.
That's
and I
happening
remember
a lot today. That's happening a lot today.
Right. And I remember, it's funny because I don't often talk about that moment, but given the theme of your show, I remember how I felt. I felt this tension inside myself that had gotten really strong at that time. And the tension was, I want to be a good person. And I believe in my political convictions. I really do. And I really love my parents. But oh my gosh, I had that moment of, what if she's right? What if she's right and associating with folks, even people in my own family, who believe things that I think are just not cool, is me not being a good person, right? So I remember having that sharp sense. And then the next thing I remember feeling was something inside me going, no, don't ever accept this. No. I just remember that. And again, I don't think I've ever necessarily told the story. So
no, but that's kind of the book that I loved because I saw that moment in it. And I'm like, all right, she's onto something now. Let's talk about this.
Right. So 4 years later, 2020, I joined my parents to watch the election results that year. And that was a very intentional move. They had their eyes wide open going, really? You want to do that? Okay, but you're going to have to be okay with Fox News. I'm like, that's cool. That's cool. We'll switch back. Fox and CNN. We'll see what happens. And it was during that day, I was taking a walk with my dad, and he was telling me about, he's a bird photographer, and he was telling me about a time that he was out taking photos of birds, and he ran into this other bird photographer he knows through Instagram who's really, really good, and he really admires his work. And they get to talking. And this other bird photographer, who was clearly on the liberal side of the spectrum, started to say bad things about the Republican candidate. And clearly assuming that my dad agreed. My dad has a Mexican accent. We were in the Seattle area, very blue, very Democratic. And so assumptions were made. And my dad was telling me with some real regret, because I know my dad, that he couldn't correct the guy. He couldn't. Instead, he just kind of nodded and pretended he agreed. But he didn't. He really respects that candidate, And so
Right.
he felt like he was undermining some part of himself. And so he tells me that story. And there's kind of a beat, and we're still walking down a path. And then the next thing he says is, Monica, I've heard that some people tell their kids, I've heard that some people tell their parents that they're no longer allowed to see their grandkids because of politics. And I wonder if that will ever happen to us. And that shocked me. And I immediately told him, the word in Spanish is jamás, never. I was like, Dad, never, jamás. That will not happen to us. And that word came out before I could think. And then my next thought was, boy, I really, really want to live up to that promise to my dad. I really, really want to live up to that promise. So the book, I wrote the book in 2020. It was first published in 2022. And I've been on the road ever since, because it's broken open a conversation, and not just about political divides in families, political divides in relationships of all kinds.
Right.
And what can we do to hold ourselves together through a challenge like this, and all the challenges it brings up. I have been a journalist my whole career, and I have learned the hard way how unbelievably easy it is to get each other wrong, and how painful it can be to get each other wrong. I just carry memories of people who I was responsible for telling their story to their community accurately, and I failed and I hurt them. And across the political divide, we get each other wrong so much. The research is astounding. So I focus on the political divide, but like you said, the skills and techniques that I think in some ways my family almost like accidentally stumbled into some of them, and then I became obsessed and started gathering more, and then I wrote the book and said, here, I think we can do this.
Right.
Let's try.
Yeah.
And that's what that was.
Well, I love it. I love it. Andy, do you have any questions or comments? Because I just love her, and I love what she's done.
I mean, Monica, I watched your TED Talk.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I like what you're saying is that I believe this is where you're kind of coming from, is that relationships have to work from the center, not from extremes.
Can you elaborate on that? That's beautiful.
Yeah, I am, because I have lots of experience in it in my background. Political, in Canada, both in federal, provincial, and municipal, and also in families, because I have estranged sons, and but they're alienated, so it's another thing. But what I'm going to say is, if we look at just the idea of democracy and the concept of that, nothing has ever worked from extremes. It always works in the center. And when we start saying, but it's this way or that way, what we need to realize, I think a lot of times, and what I think when I watch your TED Talk, is that, and maybe I'm interjecting a couple things, but for relationships to work, we have to find common ground where we seem like there is no common ground, because that's how the seeds will grow. It won't be because you like this and they like that. It's kind of having a level of acceptance, but kind of finding a place where come let us, there's, in the New Testament, Apostle Paul says, come let us reason with the Bereans. And I talk about that all the time. He took the most extremes and says, come let us have a discussion, right? So that even if, here's the thing, is if they can't see the truth right away, that by you not abandoning the center sometimes, it gives chance for that root to grow to truth. And I'll give you an example of my father. My father was a principal, and he's Scottish. And if you grew up in a Scottish household, winning an argument with a Scots person is in debate. It's not going to ever happen. And so I'd watch this through my uncles and my grandfather, who I was always close with them. We never had that kind of. But my father, what I found sometimes, he would get so hard-nosed about the most ridiculous things. And one of the techniques that I used with my father after he retired, because we worked in construction and stuff like that, I said, I have an idea, but I need you to have an open mind. Now, an intelligent person will never say no. And I'm like, but I need you, Dad, to have an open mind of what I'm going to show you. So what he could do, it's a disarming method, right?
It's a primer. It's a priming mechanism.
So it's like he could set apart from, he didn't have to compromise what he believed. And he wasn't going to be told that he wasn't willing to listen. He's a principal and a teacher.
Right.
And the whole ethos of being
your father, and you're sort of like forcing your parent to admit that, no, I'm not going to listen to you or have an open mind. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Right. And you primed him before the topic came out and his defenses might have come up.
And my father, you know, what was really interesting with I was so close with my father. But that is one technique a lot of times where he would get, because he was a very intelligent person. And so, you know, when you know that you're going into that, you know that emotions will not play out well.
Mm-hmm.
And so going crazy doesn't help. But what I found with my father, and this technique, I use it on people all the time. It's like, well, I have an idea, but you need to have an open mind. Nobody's going to tell themselves in their subconscious they don't have an open mind.
Right. And so then you have to demonstrate it.
Yeah.
Then you know you're on notice.
Yeah.
How interesting. I mean, that sounds like an amazing technique. I suppose if overused, I can see the recipient of that phrase start to wonder if there's a judgment underlying
you have to be
it.
selective and tactical
You have to be
about
selective. Exactly. You have to be selective and really genuine, right? And try not to use it to sort of, you know, I don't know, just win. So many of our arguments are honestly just sabotaged by the fact that we just need to win. And it's so difficult to embrace humility. It's difficult to, you know, accept the possibility that you might be wrong and that things might be okay if you are. It's okay. We start to feel like that's just really unacceptable. I also really like, from what you're saying, there's, you know, in my work, I run into a lot of people who, for various reasons, just feel a ton of resistance to going and talking with people who disagree with them, who have these kinds of clashes where something like no contact, you know, seems like a possibility. And one of the things that they start to build in their mind is this, they imagine this perfect conversation where they behave beautifully and they talk about the whole thing, and wow. And they set the bar for themselves and for that conversation so high that they can't imagine ever meeting it. And what we forget, I think, is that mere co-presence is already a good first step. Just being together. You don't even have to talk about the thing that you're afraid to talk about. So Laura, you were talking about the woman who sent you that note. I want to tell my parents about these things I experienced in my childhood. What's interesting is that the path to be able to have that conversation is not a piece of that conversation. It's other kinds of conversations where you start to get closer and closer to something like that. And there's a softening and there's an opening, and you can't control it because you can't control other people. But it starts with mere co-presence, mere contact, and not putting a lot of demands on it. And over time, even if it's just a minute here, 2 minutes there, you know, you're out fishing with dad and you bring up this one thing and it's 3 minutes and then you move on. That those are, I mean, you're talking about being able to cool it down. You talked about coming back to the center of relationship is how I read that. And what that means is, don't spend the whole time up at the top of the mountain where you can barely breathe. Come back down sometimes. Come back down to base camp. You know, go outside and take a walk, take a break, and then come back to it. So again, I just feel like we put so much expectation on these conversations. They seem so heavy, and we think only saints can have them, and it's just not true. We all can have them, the very messy human beings who actually exists.
So true. Now I've got 4 thoughts that I'm going to go back and then forward with. One, you mentioned the heat of the differences. And I agree, the heat is good, because as long as you have the heat, it means you care enough to talk. All right. You're not living at that surface level that this young woman is doing. Two people are, you know, very passionate about their positions and they're trying to communicate. And that heat, I think, is good. I think today, many younger generations feel that heat means, you know, you have to separate.
Yeah.
When that heat is really saying, I care enough to you to care about you and this to have this conflict, because no one feels good in that moment, right? So that's one thing. Two, I think when we talk about what's the center, I think the center in this situation is always the relationship. It's always the love. However, what I also think that sometimes it truly is beneficial when you have such a difficulty communicating and you're not getting through the other person. They're just not, maybe they're not prepared yet. Maybe they're not they're just not prepared to be able to have that conversation for whatever reason. It could be age, it could be whatever it is. All right. Sometimes it's better just to let them go off and live their life so that, life can mold them. And because sometimes we keep trying to like push the point, re-educate or educate, and we sort of hold them too long in place. We try too hard and it combusts, whereas, look, you know what? You take the attitude, let you go down the road you need to go down faster. If I keep keeping you here, I'm slowing you down from going down that road, which will then keep you. And so, which will then be able to come back and actually have a conversation. Right. A lot of parents will do that. They'll cling because they're frightened of them going.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just better to let them go earlier so that they can get back. If they're going to get back, let them get back earlier, because that lesson is out there now. Yeah. It's not in here. And so I think that's like something that's really, really important. And honestly, I don't know what the fourth one was. So
no, those are plenty. Those are really good. Those are really good. There's so much there. I once went into a coffee shop and saw one of the stands of little stickers that they had. And one of the stickers stopped me in my tracks. And the sticker said, "May the bridges I burn light my way."
Oh, I love that. I love that.
And I kind of I was instantly sort of divided. On the one hand, I know a lot of folks and I know a lot of situations where, you need to be independent. You need to not let yourself get trapped, held. When you want to be free and you want to break free, go, grab that fire from that burned bridge and light your torch and go. On the other hand, may the bridges I burn light my way. Does it carry a message of the more bridges I burn, the freer I am? Does it carry a message of when other people hold me back, I need to let them go in all cases? I don't think most people think of things that way, but that sticker made me wonder. You talked about, that there's a question in what you were saying. Can we stand the heat? There is heat. 1 in 6 Americans is not talking to a family member because of politics. Mm-hmm. That's sort of my world. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of folks feel that. And the heat is intense. The stakes are high when it comes to political divides, at least. They feel really high. So what could we do to stand the heat? And my work centers on curiosity in particular. For me, curiosity is this cognitive superpower. It's this thing that we can aim at what we don't understand. And we don't always recognize that we can be proactive with our curiosity. The thing about curiosity is one of its arch villains is fear. You can't wonder about something you think is out to get you. We are all descendants of people who ran away from the proverbial bear. We didn't ask if the bear was fuzzy. We just ran. Right. So there's also that sense of when people feel that kind of threat level, right? Because I said the question is, are you cooking something or are you burning something when there's heat in a conversation? Only the people in that conversation can really know. There's no formula that applies to everybody at all times. It's too complicated to try to figure it out universally. So if something is burning, your sense of dignity. You can tell the relationship is like on fire right now. And your being in here is not helping. The more your fear becomes present in the conversation, the less curious you can actually be, the less open-minded you can actually be. So at that point, it can be the best move. Not necessarily to burn the bridge. In fact, try really hard not to. But take a break. In that moment, at least take a break.
And I think that's a great skill. And the thing is, one of the things I loved about your book is you mentioned the curiosity factor, because what the curiosity factor does, in my opinion, in many of these cases when applied to estrangement, is if I've got a child in front of me or an adult child in front of me, that's, we're at this crossroads. you know, instead of, it sort of like can deliver you back from defensiveness, like this young woman, you know, these her parents again, and actually put you in a position of, well, it almost like it puts you in a different place where you could say, well, you know, being curious, I'm taking it less personally. I'm being more like, well, how is she, like, what does she think, like, what, you know, so it sort of puts it into a more of a critical thinking versus a personal thinking. And when you're critical thinking, then you diffuse the heat.
Exactly.
That because you're critically thinking, now this person is my child, but this first person is also a person trying to tell me something. And how is it that I'm not hearing it, or what do I need to do, or you know, so it puts you in a different mind frame, it twists it.
That's
and
right.
that's more of an opportunity to then hear them, at least understand. And I do agree with the break, because I have used it in my life, and the break works. So if you take a step back and take a break. In fact, I was having a conversation with my own younger son last night, and you know, whereas like for me, it's like an 8 o'clock cutoff, or we're talking about something that's intense, and it could be any subject. I know by 8 o'clock I'm done. So don't talk to me about something that's like crazy, you know, that I need to like really think on past 8 o'clock. And when 8 o'clock comes, it's like 8 o'clock is done. That's no, and he goes, 8 o'clock, I know.
Yeah, got it, Mom. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that's not because I don't want to have a conversation, right? But I know how I work.
Right. And that's the thing. A lot of people also, I think, we overlook the fact that if I'm having a conversation with another person, it's not one conversation, it's three. It's the conversation I'm having with the other person, the conversation I'm having with myself at the same time, and the conversation they're having with themselves at the same time. So when you're having a conversation with another person, it gets really heated, you're afraid something's burning. One of the good reasons to take a break is that you then don't have two simultaneous conversations, one of which is just continuously like turning the burner up. You get to continue the conversation with yourself. I can't tell you how often this has happened to me. In fact, there was one time I called a friend like days after a really intense conversation we had about a really polarizing issue, abortion, where we disagree. And I called her to tell her that I had realized on a drive that day that something she said had shifted something in my mind. But it took days, you know? And so it took days after the conversation I had with her and the questions she asked and the ways that we challenged each other to sit and stew in my mind. And then boom, like an insight came about how I really feel about something. And I had to call and tell her. We ended up kind of crying. We're like, nobody does this. It's kind of cool. but I think it's just a reminder that, you know, again, like nothing, all the things that you hope and dream will find closure and happen in a conversation. It could be the conversation that other person has with themselves later. And the cooling down might happen later. And the insights and the intelligence and the wisdom might show up after they're in that high tense environment of in a conversation with you. So you got to give that time, you know, and we're very impatient. We're very demanding.
Monica, can I factor something into when you ask curiosity questions, right? So I'm going to make an assumption here, so you can correct me. But the assumption is, by you asking the question, it helps you hear how they paint and see their worldview. And it forces you to become empathetic. You don't have to agree, but you can at least understand, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we wonder, well, how did they get there? What is that? And I think a lot of times, I do want to put a little side note on, is that by asking that empathetic question, like, well, why do you like to do this? Not as a judgment.
Yes.
But as trying to understand. Like, Dad, why do you support that? And then, because can I suggest another thing? I won't get into it, but
please, yes.
What we ask a lot of times, is that we want someone who has created a worldview, whether they realize it or not, that they want to keep that worldview intact because it creates certainty
and identity in some cases.
Yeah, but the identity comes from the certainty.
Yes.
And so what happens is when you start, if you come in hot, what it will do is it will actually reinforce the worldview and their certainty.
That's right. Because they'll put their guard up immediately.
Yeah. Whereas if you ask, like, well, Dad, why do you think that way?
Yeah, no, you nailed it.
And
Absolutely.
it comes back to also giving the person you're asking the question the opportunity, like you say, time is a factor of it, because once they start unpacking the truth of the question, not when you're there, their subconscious will start wrestling with them as well. And they need to have room that they can come back in that door and have a conversation.
That's absolutely right. In my research into the political divide, I don't just focus on the most obvious set of consequences, which is between the kind of red-blue side, generalizingly speaking. It's also the kind of blindness that division creates within our own sides. So people assume so much on the same side that they all kind of agree that we've stopped asking each other all kinds of questions about, how did you come to believe that? How did you come to believe that? We don't know a lot of times ourselves. So it can become an act of sort of, it's like an investigation. Like you join someone else in a little detective story. And the question you said, why do you believe that? A lot of times that question people don't actually have their answer necessarily ready. What they will first give is often what they feel others have given, others like them have given, and so they'll just like, well, what did I hear on, TikTok? What was that really popular video that I saw with a really good point? And they'll give you that reason. You end up having to go levels down usually to get to the person's actual origin to their opinion. And it usually looks like something more like a personal story, like a set of experiences, like they're walking you through that path. In fact, one of the most powerful techniques I teach is to ask how instead of why. Because the other thing about why is that if you're in the heat of a tough conversation and there's suspicion and there's mistrust, right? And people might wonder if they should have their arms crossed and their guard up, if not already at that posture, then why do you believe what you believe can sound very loaded. And like you're actually asking them not to justify their reasons for an intellectual position, but to justify themselves. Now it's you versus me. Let's go, right? So if you take that question and you go, I'm not going to ask, why do you believe what you believe? I'm going to ask, how did you come to believe what you believe? Then I'm not asking for reasons. I'm asking for a story. I'm not putting you on the stand. I'm asking you to take me on a tour. And what's great about that is everybody's the world's reigning expert on their own story. Right? So it's a little harder to be like, but here's a source that contests what you're saying. You can join people in that. And a really beautiful thing is that people can only hear when they're heard, when they feel really divided. So you give people that time to explain and even investigate. And if you give them a little room, don't try to hold them to something, don't point out contradictions. Don't interrupt that. I thought you said last week that blah, blah, blah. No, listen to them as they explore themselves in your presence. What a gift. And when that starts to happen bit by bit, wow, doors can start to open that were previously closed. You can't guarantee it because you can't control other people. But sometimes it takes a lot of courage just to ask that kind of question. How did you believe what you believe? Ask it curiously, not with a tone of judgment, and then actually listen for like 3 minutes. It takes some people so much courage just to do that it can speak volumes to the other person.
And it's uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
It's uncomfortable. And we live in a society that doesn't like uncomfortable.
No.
We live in a society that feels very good about living in silos.
Yes.
And to the detriment of unity. We're seeing it in every which way. We're seeing it in politics. We're seeing it in families. We're seeing it in, even down to global warming and all that kind of, where, Christianity, religion, we're seeing it all over the place. Because it's much easier to live in a silo. We live in an easy society. Everything is easy. Everything is quick. Everything, all the answers are there. But it's not benefiting us because we're all suffering in so many different ways. And, and I think the how is great because, and that's one of the things that caught me about your book too. I think the how is great, with my own, I've got a son who loves politics and, loves all that kind of stuff. And, the reality is when I've used this technique on him, what's amazing is that the amount of homework he's done, and because silos are real, and you can easily fall in one without really even realizing it. You're in one.
Yep.
You take the assumptions of that, and all of a sudden, he comes out with, yeah, but this is also the other side of it, and this, and admittedly, I didn't see that. I did not see that because I'm living in one area of this. But when he tells me, I'm like, oh, and I'm talking about politics, but none of it. But oh, like, okay, if that's true, then I get it. And maybe I even change my position. And I think you have to be open to that, but that's very uncomfortable. That's very uncomfortable, but you have to have that center.
Yeah.
I want him to feel heard. I want him to feel like he has value. I have to recognize that he actually knows, things that are very valuable overall. And that he's doing, he's earned credibility because I know he does his homework. So I think that's also a big part of it, Monica. I think that, there is such a diminishment of credibility that parents are feeling, like, because I think they feel like this current society has diminished their roles, and has diminished that, we saw in another show, parents got reduced to, cherished friends in their title as opposed to being a parent. Well, they're not cherished friends. Parents are not cherished friends. They could be friends down the line, but a parent does so much more than a cherished friend ever could even conceive in raising a child. So that becomes that pulling, stressing, deterioration of the actual meaning of being a parent does not play well in having conversations when the person is talking to you as if you have no relevance and no credibility. You understand that?
I mean, I'm a parent too, so the role of the parent and how it's viewed in society and the debates people have, I think we're living in a time where people are looking for more freedom, and we've always been looking for more freedom. And we're asking ourselves on all these different arenas of life how we can find it, and if we've got the right set of relationships and the right set of norms in place. I think the last 10-15 years have been enormously disruptive, and you can look at them as very exploratory, but they've also been, they've left their scars. So it's like we're in this big open negotiation with each other, and one of the things we're negotiating is, okay, what is the role of the parent? What is the role of the child? To what extent do those roles and those obligations supersede, what we want as individuals? And I don't know. So I think there's just so much going on about that, about where is our liberty and where is our duty? And these things are part of the tension that, I mean, as an immigrant, I really appreciate living in a country that is okay with those tensions. We have so many tensions, and they animate all of our divides. And you've just named a really, really important one. So yeah, as a parent of, alpha generation kids, it continues to evolve. Let me tell you,
I don't envy you.
Like every generation faces these new sets of challenges, and I know that everybody's trying their best with what they've got, but I also know that when we talk about generational change, it's another way of saying that our cultures change, and different groups of people grow up with different sets of cultures, and then they apply those cultural conditioning things to all their relationships, including their family ones. And so here we are at a time where family estrangement is certainly more of a conversation. We've seen lots of evidence that it's happening more. Okay, like, where does this come from? So again, I apply curiosity. Where does this come from? And then the beautiful insight you brought up, Laura, where a lot of the times it's a deep-seated fear that's causing some of the most pain, but those fears are difficult to surface, name, process, and deal with together.
Right.
What can
Right.
we do to surface, process, and deal with those things together before those things overwhelm us and end
Right.
up putting us in a world we didn't want?
Right. Right. I agree. I so agree. Andy, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I did have a follow-up. I got a little bit of lag on my system. I don't know if you can see that, but
No.
so Monica, one of the questions you have Generation Alpha, okay? So I have two stepkids. That one is 16, one is 18. I've had two older kids. So I would like to know, when you see the comparison, how your approach to what you're seeing in them compared to your parents' approach to parenting you. Like how are you seeing differences in modifications?
Ooh, wow. That's a difficult question to answer because I know my experience is not necessarily representative of anyone else's.
Right.
I live in the Seattle area, kind of a bigger
Mhm.
city. It's very different from a lot of places in the country. All that said, one of the things that I notice right off the bat is that at least my circle of my generation of parents we hang out a lot with our kids. We hang out a lot with our kids. Like, we
Yeah.
grew up in a, generation where play dates are something that the parents are there for a lot. And when I was growing up with my parents, I mean, sure, we hung out, but a lot of, dinners at other friends' houses, there was a kids' table.
Yeah.
And these days, there's like no kids' table. Everybody hangs out together, and it's really interesting. I don't know how that will pan out. I also know that my generation, I know there's evidence for this, there's more of kind of the two-parent household. Like, me and my husband actually share pretty 50-50 all the stuff on the family, and we're going, and doing our work. We share a lot about our work with our kids. Also, a lot of families are working from home because that's more possible, and the pandemic disrupted a lot of things for office work. Of course, we're seeing a return to the office, but not always. So yeah, like, my kids are here while I'm working, and they knock on the office and they come in and they're suddenly on a call. So all kinds of these different spheres that I think other generations kept separate, my generation is kind of like smushing all together. Another thing I think about is my generation's struggling sometimes with how to allow kids to be independent when there's fears about their safety. So there's, statistics about that. And I'm a bit of a subscriber to free range parenting, that movement. So my kids walk themselves to school, but not everybody's comfortable with that. And I hear some of that. I have no idea how this is all going to pan out. But I think because they are so privy to a lot of the conversations and interactions that I have with my adult friends, I'm very mindful of how I want to model humility and curiosity to my kids. So it's like I'm on display for them, right? So if I act really arrogant, if I act too certain about something that I shouldn't know that much about, and they're watching, it's that much more important that I'm brave enough to admit when I'm wrong, and that I don't make a big deal out of it, and that I ask questions if, somebody comes at me with some kind of stereotype about another group of people. And I try to model that for my kids as much as I can, because their world is some parts of it are pretty nasty and pretty snipey right now. And I really don't want that to be the way they think things work. And I don't know if I got to what you might have been thinking of. So please, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I break in? Andy, let me just break in a second, because you just left a thought for me, okay? One, you also have to deal with the tech issue, which, even though you're spending a lot more time together, it's looking like you're not having the value time that is happening, especially with the younger kids, because they're going to school. Many of them are going to school at 5 years old. They're not potty trained because mom is on the phone, dad is on the phone, so that's a problem. All right. Yeah. So even though you may be spending, second, in the European culture, that divide of having the children's table doesn't exist. That's worked very well for them around throughout history. So I see that too. But here's the thing. Here's the question, the big question that many of these estranged parents are dealing with. If they hold a different view of a particular event, and that adult child is saying, well, this is what it was, and you're saying, no, that is not what it was.
Mhm.
Okay. That is not where I came from. This is, you may have heard that, but
Mhm.
what you hear is not my responsibility. My responsibility is what I say. I can't worry about, I can't block everything you decide to hear, right?
Mhm.
As much as I want to be able to do that, if I could do it, but here's the reality. So we are on opposite sides of something, all right? And you want me to say to you that, you know what? My reality is wrong. I was wrong. Your reality is the only one in the room, and that's real reality. When the parent is saying, that is not what I said, did, and but the only way to continue on with the conversation or relationship is by laying down on that. How do you not damage your own credibility to you because you want to be honest with yourself? Okay. They don't want to agree with something that did not happen.
Mhm.
How do you get through moments like that? Because no parent should
Yeah,
live a lie because they're being told they need to live a lie to be able to have the relationship.
that's right. This is extremely tough. And there's a very similar parallel situation in the political divide that I get asked about a lot, which is, what if I'm talking to someone who disagrees with me politically and they're telling me something political and they've got facts that I don't think are true, like straight up not true. It's a very similar situation. And the thing that really works is first to kind of, go up a couple levels. And there's a friend of mine named Buster Benson. He wrote a book called Why Are We Yelling? And he talks about how there's 3 different types of conversations about disagreement. There's the conversation about what's true, which is kind of the one that we're stuck on in this situation. There's the conversation about what's meaningful, which is a very different conversation and the only one that builds trust. And then there's the conversation about what's useful. So the short answer to this conundrum that I find really useful is you switch from having the conversation about what's true to having the conversation about what's meaningful. A lot of times when people are having the conversation about what's true, it's like 4 thick walls. And if you don't fit into my conception of reality, I can't talk to you. You're
Mhm.
out. You're out. So
Mhm.
that is very restrictive. And some people think, well, that's where people start to load up a prospective conversation with someone that they're in conflict with so many preconditions that it'll never happen. Well, until they admit so and so, I can't talk to them, right? So how do you break through that? It's by switching the conversation. Get out of the whole arena where there's those 4 thick walls based around like allegiance to facts and truth. I know that sounds crazy, especially coming from a journalist. I love truth, let me tell you. Switch to the conversation about what's meaningful. What does that mean? That means instead of talking about what's factual, what's true, and starting to litigate that, you talk about people's concerns. So you just go, what's really bothering you about this? What's ultimately concerning you about this? You know how we were saying earlier that a lot of the trick and the hardest thing is to surface the deep-seated fears? That's the conversation that has the shot at doing that.
Right.
Because a lot of times when there's a conflict that is about, what one person said happened or what another person said happened and their ability to receive these different versions of the truth that they're really resistant to, what's really going on is something a lot deeper, especially when we have close family relationships with a lot of history and a lot of contention and a lot of sometimes baggage that builds up. It can really be about something else. So just soften the conversation about what's true. Just put it to the side and switch to the conversation about what's meaningful. What's worrying you? What's concerning you? Those are the questions, but you can also just answer the questions to somebody else. Listen, here's what's ultimately worrying me. Here's where I feel really scared. I'm afraid you're pulling away from me because of this. And I stay up at night. And maybe that sounds crazy, but I don't know. I feel nervous even saying these words out loud to you right now. Like just any way that you either answer that question to somebody else or you ask that question non-judgmentally, ready to listen really deeply all the way and not interrupt for a few minutes. That's when you start to get the kind of trust built and the kinds of things seen that were previously unseen, where maybe later, and this happens in politics all the time, once you build that trust in the political conversation, you can then say, can I show you the sources that I've seen that lead me to a completely different view of this issue? And people are not going to be assigned homework by you if they think you're trying to change them. They're not going to do it.
But let me
But
ask
if
you.
you spend time together, they'll open up to your view of things.
Well, let me ask a question. So you leave the truth conversation, drop it for a second, you take the meaningful conversation, you have the meaningful conversation. Now you understand what is causing them concern. Okay?
I mean, hopefully, right? That's a tough sell, but
let's say you do.
Let's say you do.
Then they say to you at the end of that meaningful conversation, when you all understand it, because this is happening too, they say, yes, and if you don't change because this makes me feel this way, that I still can't have a relationship with you. So that is happening, where you either do it my way, because now I understand you and I've attempted to understand you, and you're still saying to me, nope, you have to do it my way, or I don't have a relationship with you. And so you have attempted, the other person has to agree to want to have the relationship. And a lot of, in our community, a lot of times that's not happening. It's they phrase it as a boundary when it's really an ultimatum.
Yeah, it's a hostage negotiation.
I mean, there's only so much we can do. I think about a parent I know. I've been trading notes with them for years now. It's gotten to the point. She happens to be very liberal and has a very conservative son, and they're estranged. The conservative son has just said, your views are pure evil and I just can't. It's gotten to the point where for her to be able to give her grandkids gifts on their birthday, it can only happen at their basketball games. So she shows up to the gym, and that's where the gifts are exchanged.
Yeah.
Her journey, these things are so painful. But she got to the point where she realized, I've done everything I can do. And what I'm going to do now is leave the light on by the door. And let them know that it's open for them if they want to come. But she just got to the point where this is grinding me down, and they're going to take their space, and I'm going to be here. And I think it takes a lot of courage sometimes to say, I'm going to be here.
Well, I agree. And I think that there's a point where many parents get to who meet that thing where they have decided that it's just, they have no choice but to, these kids will live in their hearts and they'll love them from a distance. They just can't love them close up. Right. And one, they're not being given a chance to. And two, at some point, if the child is doing that or coming in and out, every time there's an issue, then the child goes estranged again. And these parents can't take it. Their hearts are breaking every time. So in order for self-preservation, they have to, love them from a distance, which doesn't mean they don't love them. They love them, but they just, it's a very hard time because you're seeing, the environment and the peer environment, the environment overall, that influence, and then the parent influence bucking heads of the family influence, and only one can win. I've said this before, only one can win, right? And right now I see that the family has been pushed down and the environment has been pushed up, and it's not boding well. That is not boding well for families. It's not boding well for anybody. No one is doing well right now. One of my friends who's a really good therapist, and look, there's some really great therapists out there. But she's saying she's still working leading up to Christmas. This is the worst mental health year she has seen in her practice. And she deals with grief of all different kinds. And she has seen the worst grief she's ever seen.
Yeah. And the US Surgeon General has talked about the loneliness epidemic that's out there. We've got all these connection technologies, woohoo! And yet somehow somehow we don't feel that connected. There's studies that show that people have fewer close friends than they used to.
Yeah, 100%.
So what is happening? And we've got to ask really hard questions about, the choices that we see available to us, what's pushing us to one avenue or another. Boy, yeah, we're trying to balance so much.
We are.
Could I interject one thing, Monica? I think how I see the two camps kind of sitting in our society is there's this idea of perfectionism in what we're looking at with the younger generation growing up. And here's the reason why I state that is, and I've got two really good examples of it. When we look at this generation of parents that are growing up and they're looking on Instagram every day and they're looking for that, they are getting a different kind of feedback, of a perfectionism kind of feedback of how things actually should go. As opposed to when I grew up, I didn't have that. And the other thing is that your grandmother was around, your grandfather was around, like that was the influence. So it's like many people who have met me say, oh, Andrew is just like his grandmother because of the influence. And that's what I'm trying to say is that I didn't grow up with this illusion of my grandmother being perfect, but she loved me and cared for me as well as all my uncles and that. And so I had a much more, I think, robust, and I don't want to say healthy because every family has problems, but it was a better place for a life jacket to learn the worldview as opposed to changing patterns when everybody opens up, and I'll say statistically, women will open up their phone at 7:00 in the morning and they will start doing their scrolling. And that over time creates this reinforced worldview and perfectionism. And then they start looking in comparison, like but my mom doesn't, she's not even on the same planet as you.
Yeah, exactly. We've got so many little islands,
Does that make sense?
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, our family has a bunch of rules. There's no phones in the bedroom. There's definitely no phones over dinner. The ways in which we can be together spontaneously and create our own reality with that shared co-presence. Our technologies have conditioned us to think that getting information, entertainment, and engagement is a solo act.
Yeah.
Wow. And hey, there's companies out there that make a lot of money off that belief.
It'll be interesting to see how, since Australia put the curtain down on it, it'll be interesting to see the impact on their society from it, because I think it's a really good decision. I wish we had it here, but it'll be very interesting to see what makes the difference. I have to end the show. We're already well over. You know what? Let me tell you something, girl. You need to come back.
I'll be back.
Come back, because this is a great conversation, and there's so much more to your book. There's so much more to you. It's great that you're bringing the light. And look how well you're discussing it from so many different angles, even angles I didn't think you'd even go. So, so there you go. You're a really incredible communicator, and you're really helping to teach others to do the same. And whether or not everyone agrees with you or doesn't agree with you, agrees with every opinion you're helping, you're trying. And that's, I wish everyone was in that same mindset as you. So yes, I want you to come back. Okay.
Yay. Well, thank you both. Andy, it was wonderful to meet you and get to know your perspective, and really appreciate the conversations that you're opening up for people. And it's clear, I mean, you've gathered a lot of folks to sit around the hearth here. And so you have a real opportunity to help a lot of folks. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, it was great meeting you.
Thank you. I'll send you all the links and everything. We're going to have you back on. I'm going to close the show. I'm going to take you both off air, and I'll just finish it out. And Andy, I'll talk with you afterwards. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Bye, Monica.
Bye, Monica.
Bye. Thanks.
Wow, that was we could go on for hours, but I usually try to keep the show to about an hour, and we're over. So let me just finish with here's the book again, Doormat Mom, No More. Pick it up on Amazon, and the sales are going through the roof right now. So it's a good read, and it will definitely expand your community of estranged parents and all the things that we're dealing with on this side of the fence, so to speak. Unfortunately, there is a fence right now, but all right. And that is it. That is it. I have another wonderful guest next week. She's a therapist as well, and she's going to be talking about a stranger from her perspective. But in the meantime, it is Friday. Have a wonderful, well, this probably come out Saturday, but have a wonderful weekend, guys. And I'll see you soon. And Doormat Mom, no more. Out.